What is the last thing that you do when you finish writing your story? I'll tell you the last thing that I do. The last edit, the last revision that I make is to add details to my story. And I'll talk about why I do that, why it's the very last thing. Well, I should say the very last thing is to edit for grammatical and spelling errors and, all of that stuff. But the last content edit that I make is to add details. So let's talk about details today.
You have a story to tell, but you don't know where to start. Let me show you how to free your story. I teach you how to write and how to dig deep in your soul to release your story and make a difference in the world.
Welcome to the Julia Monte channel. If we're just meeting, I am Julia Monte. I'm a women's fiction author, and I come to you, as you probably know if you're following me, on Fridays to give you a few writing tips, to talk about writing and to help you to maybe help you to write your story. So today, let's talk about adding details to a story and why it's so important and what I'm talking about as far as details. So I want to read just a little section of, well, just a little paragraph, not a whole section, of a book that I read recently by Janet Ivanovich. Title of it is Motor Mouth. So if you've read Janet Ivanovich, you know that she writes very quick romantic stories. They're funny. The characters are, they're just a lot of fun to read. So this is pretty much at the opening of the book. And it says, I was standing on the flat roof of the Homestead Miami Speedway grandstand, getting a bird's eye view of the scrubby Florida landscape. Heat waves shimmered on the track below me, and the air was thick with fumes from scorched rubber, high-octane gas, and the euphoria NASCAR brings to a race. I was with 42 guys on the roof. I was the only one on the roof wearing a pink lace thong. At least I was almost certain I was the only one with a thong since I was the only female. But hell, what do I know? Okay, so again, very cute, very funny. And when I first started reading the paragraph, I was pretty sure I was in the female point of view, but I wasn't sure because she could have started with the male point of view. Since there's usually, again, in a romance, you have the male and the female point of view, in a, traditional, heterosexual romance. So I wasn't really sure whose point of view I was in. But then, so she makes a few important, she has a few important details here, right? So a really cute way of saying that, hey, I'm the female character, is with what she said with the pink lace thong. Again, very cute. The part about, I'm pretty sure that I'm the only one, but hey, you never know, right? That's kind of funny. Also the way the details that she adds about exactly where she is. She gives us a sense of the setting, tells us what it feels like to be in that Miami Speedway, the smells, the scents. So again, she puts us into the setting using details that we can relate to, that we could kind of get the feel of what it might smell like to be in a speedway. So really good. So compare this to saying something like, I'm a skinny blonde chick working at a speedway in Miami. Okay, kind of cute, really fast, right? But it misses out on all those details. So I would tend to write that second version. So especially on my first draft, is I'm just trying to get the information out there. And I'm not a hugely, I don't work really well with details. I need to. That's why it's almost the last thing I write. The last revision that I make is because I am almost always lacking in details. I'm lacking visual, any kind of sensual detail, smells, touch, all that stuff. So I go back in at the very end and I add those things in so that it sounds not as good as Janet Ivanovich, but at least I have some details in there. So why are details so important? Well, for the reasons that I said, right? They pull us into a story. They put us into a setting so we know where we're at. It makes us feel what that setting is like. What does it feel like? What does it smell like? What sounds are we hearing? She could have added that. She didn't add that, but she could have added sounds too, right, of the cars. They also will introduce us to characters. They'll introduce us to locations. And again, those details make us feel like we are actually in that character's head, in that character's body, so that we are feeling as readers what the character is feeling in the story by being wherever they're being and doing whatever they're doing. It also makes us understand that we are reading a story by a professional writer, someone who has taken the time to go back, to add those details, to bring us along with the story, that they're not just telling us a story. So my second version of the skinny blonde chick working at a Miami Speedway, that tells you who she is. It doesn't make you feel what she's feeling, right? It doesn't give you, first of all, her personality, which is another great thing that these details and that Janet Ivanovich does with this in this story, is she gives you this character's point of view and her personality, so we know who she is, right? And the way that she thinks. So again, adding those details in there, adding her voice into the story, which the voice is something completely different, but it's part, it's part of details as well. That lets us know that we are reading a story by somebody who has taken the time to put those details in there for us and make us feel what the character's feeling. And we're going to talk about like what specific details to add, because you can't add everything. We don't want to know, we can't really know everything, right? Even when we go somewhere and we experience something ourselves, we don't pay attention to everything, right? We're not paying attention to sounds and voices and people talking and smells and sounds and music. Not everything at once. It's almost as it's in the background. So sometimes you walk into, let's say, a restaurant, maybe the first thing you notice is a smell. Or maybe if you walk in and it's really dark, you notice, that there's the lack of light as your eyes adjust to the place. And you, at that moment, when your eyes are adjusting, when you're trying to see, you are honestly not even noticing the music or the people that are talking, that you're not noticing that. So one of the things you want to do as a writer is think, okay, when something is happening, what exactly is this character noticing? And that is what you describe. Those are the details that you want to add in there. Okay, a lot of people will add scents of food, right? And that is important, but it's not always the first thing we notice. When I walk into my mom's house, sometimes it is. She's cooking. I smell I might smell like the smell of burnt sugar. And I'm thinking and praying that, oh, wow, that means that she's making a flan for dessert. And I might notice that the first thing I walk in, but I might also notice something else. I might notice that it's hot in her house and maybe she's not running the air conditioner. I might wonder what's wrong with her air conditioner. I might walk in and hear a dog and then think, well, my mom doesn't know a dog. Who's here, right? Who brought a dog? So there are different things that you're going to notice, even going to the same place, depending on what is happening, what's different, and what is hitting that character at that moment, depending on what's on that character's mind. So what I want you to think about is, what concrete details can you add? So Ivanovich's description has very concrete details. The smell of the burnt rubber, the standing on the roof with 42 guys or however many guys were there, right? You can get the feel of what it feels like to be standing there, and then she's the only female and they're all men. So again, these are very concrete details. She doesn't just say, I'm standing here on a crowded balcony, right? She specifically concrete details, exact details of how many guys were there, how many people, what she's wearing. And then she didn't tell you everything she's wearing, right? She told you one thing to get your attention, to let you know that she's a female, to let you know that her personality, all of that, right? So pick the detail that is concrete, that is that's going to make the most impact, and that the character would notice or would think, depending on that character's personality. Something else that about this concrete detail about the lingerie is that it gives us, right, that personality of the character, and it makes you wonder more. So she's sort of this tough girl who's working in a speedway, surrounded by men, but she also has a soft side, right? So she's wearing this pink lingerie, which makes you ask questions about her. You want to know more about her because of this detail that Ivanovich gave you. So it works really, really well. It does multiple things at once. makes probably the reader smile or laugh. It makes the reader interested. It gives the reader her personality. So it does so many things at once, which makes it just a perfect detail to add. And that's what you need to do, is think about, like, what is that perfect detail that I can add to this paragraph, to this scene, to really pop and make my reader interested in reading more about what I'm about to say, especially at the beginning of a story. When I was in grad school taking a creative writing class, or multiple creative writing classes, I had this professor who was very specific about detail. He wanted details. He always asked for, okay, well, I want more details, more details, more details. And the reason that he was doing that was because it's so important to add those details to your story, because vague details, uh, just saying, they were eating food, it can be so many things, and it's almost like not really describing at all. So if you're not going to give those concrete, specific details, then you might as well not describe it, because it's almost like not saying anything. If they're eating food, well, obviously, if they're in a restaurant, they're eating food. Their food arrived. Well, what exactly arrived to their table, so that the reader can smell it, can think about it, can remember the last time they ate that. Okay, so my professor was right to have us maybe overdo the details, so that it was engraved in our brain that we needed to add those details. So you might even think, when you're writing or revising, I'm just going to pour on the details, and then I might even revise to take some out, because it's actually easier to take things out, right? At least I think it is for me, to say, okay, well, I don't need this detail, but to think of it sometimes after the fact and say, okay, well, what can I actually add here? That's a lot harder sometimes. So pour on the details. Don't be afraid of having too many. You can always pull them out and say, well, I'm overdoing it here. I don't really need to describe this. I don't really need to give them the smell and the feel and the sounds. I can maybe just do the most important one. So again, you notice Ivanovich did not have sound, maybe because it was too much. Maybe she had it in her first version, who knows? But you can always take things out later. So pour on those details, and don't be afraid that you have too much. It's always, to me, better to overwrite than to underwrite. So something else, when you're just trying to decide really what to include, what details to include, or what to describe, is to think about the uniqueness of the situation and of the character. So we all have our own perspectives. We all see the world slightly different. So the way that I see something might be completely different, probably is completely different from what you are seeing. So if I'm describing it my way, or really, the characters, right? You're in the character's head. You're describing it the way the character would see it. It's going to be different than what the reader might pay attention to. So it's always interesting to see something that's different or just unique to that character. One person, for example, might see a home in suburbia and think it's quiet and quaint and really fall in love with it. Another person may come and say, oh, it's boring. There's nothing here. There's no energy in this place, right? So depending on that character's personality, they're going to see the exact same thing and think and feel something different. Or alternatively, the same person could go to the same place and see things differently at different times, depending on their state of mind. If they just came back from a funeral and they're sad, right? They might go to this quiet neighborhood where they're going to spend a month or whatever, and think, oh, it's too depressing here. There's no energy. It's too quiet. I need something else. I need my mind preoccupied with something. I need to go to a place where there's things that are happening. I don't want this quiet, boring, sad place. Or alternatively, they could think, this is perfect. This is there's nobody here to bother me. It's quiet. I don't see any neighbors I love it because it's quiet, right? So it just depends on how you want to portray your character and the state of mind that the character has. That's another way that you can choose to, pick and choose the details, and you can even contrast it, right, with someone else. So maybe this character's husband or this character's child says the opposite of what the main character says. The main character says this is boring, and the husband says, no, this is perfect. Wow, what a beautiful place, right? So think about that, like, from the perspective of the character, what details can you add, and what does that tell us? How is that going to help us understand your character better? So those details will serve two purposes. One is to let the reader see what the character is seeing and see the place. The other is to tell us what that character is feeling, who that character is, understanding that character's point of view and personality. Something else that you can think of when choosing what to describe or what details to add is to think of something that is unexpected or unusual, okay? Because that's what we notice, right? So when I had my example of going to visit my mom and hearing a dog bark, knowing that she doesn't have one, well, then that is unusual, right? That's unexpected. So that is exactly what I'm going to notice going into her house. I am probably not going to notice the smells of the food and all that, because I'm going to notice the thing that is most unusual, the thing that is most unique. So that's one of the ways that you can choose details to describe as well. Something that is different. Your character is following a murder suspect and uh, runs into a clown on the street. Okay, unexpected, right? Oh, wow. Okay, they're going to notice that. And, when you watch movies where the detective is looking for certain things, that's what they notice, right? What's unusual? What's different? I was just watching an episode of Bosch, the Bosch Legacy series, and he noticed that the victim had was wearing a watch because her arm, you could tell, right, the tan on the arm. Well, what did he do? He noticed a detail that was unusual, that, could be unusual. Most people really don't wear watches very much anymore. The Apple watches maybe, or those kind of watches. We don't tend to wear a lot of watches. We wear jewelry, we wear other things, or but anything that's out of the ordinary that your character notices, that's important to the story, or that helps us understand the character better. Those are the details that you want to choose. And again, there's so much to choose from, right? I know when I teach classes, right? I'm a professor and I teach writing and communication at a university. And I was teaching at a community college at one point, and I was, again, I have like 30 students, let's say, per class, so maybe 100 students in a semester. There's a lot of students that go through, 2 semesters in the year. It's just a lot of students, and so sadly, I don't remember everybody, right? So if it's been 3, 4, 5 years, I might not remember the person. I might remember the face if they come to me, but I'm not going to remember everybody. And so but this one student, I still remember, like 5, 6 years ago, why he had a tattoo on his forehead that said "Mom." How many people have a tattoo on their forehead that says "Mom"? And then, after, of course, it's the first thing you notice as he walks into the classroom. And so there was a story behind that eventually he told me. But he had tattoos everywhere. Like, that wasn't his only tattoo. He was also a really, really big guy, like a football player size guy. And I remembered him because of all these multiple tattoos, mainly the mom tattoo. Then I found out him and his brother, they have a tattoo parlor, and like through the whole semester, he kept telling me I should go in and get a tattoo. It's like, no, I don't want one. I don't want anything carved into my skin. I just don't want that, right? And he kept trying to convince me to come, try to convince me to come. So why do I remember this guy? Because he was not unusual in like a strange way. He was just different, right? He was someone that made an impression because of actually something visual that was right on his face, and then the rest of his body, and the fact that we had this kind of funny relationship where he kept trying to convince me to go and get a tattoo. He was, again, just so he was so unique. He was a lot of fun, actually. Okay, so I remember him though, right? So the point is, why? Something different, something unusual. And you might think of ways like this that you can make your characters more memorable, something that your reader will remember about this character and distinguish that character from other characters in your story, especially if they're very similar. If you have 4 or 5 friends, you want to make each one unique. Okay, something else that you might want to think about when you're adding details, trying to describe things, is sometimes telling the reader what the character is not, or what something is not. So because of the contrast of what something is and something what is not, we will tend to remember that. It might make an impression. So for example, if I say, The massive hip height. That's really hard to say. The massive hip height journal German Shepherd. The massive hip height. Okay, this is really hard to say. The massive. I should have written something different. Hip height German Shepherd strained against his owner's leash, his hot, rotting cabbage breath hitting me with each bark, while my chubby corgi puppy cowered between my legs. Okay, that was such a hard sentence to say. But anyways, you get the idea. You have this big giant dog, right? Terrible breath, barking, and then you have this little fat tiny corgi that's hiding behind my legs. So it depends on what I'm describing. If I'm describing my dog, that's a really good way to make that contrast, right? To show you something different between this what he's not. He's not a big, giant, scary dog. He's a little tiny chubby dog, right? So it shows you the difference by using contrast. And you can use the same strategy to show maybe when something's just not quite right, right? So if the detective sees this businessman just impeccably dressed, nice suit, but he has maybe a chipped nail or oil under his nails, or he has some cuts on his body, that the detective might notice those details because it's unusual. What's going on? Where was he? Why does he have these cuts? This, that kind of stuff that gives the detective a clue to maybe something's not quite right. So just remember that details are what really make us enjoy life, right? It's the differences are the details that we see and that we notice is what makes life so interesting and so much fun. So imagine what it would be like if every tree was exactly the same. Every tree was a palm tree. Every tree was whatever, right? Yeah, it could be kind of cool at first, maybe not, but it wouldn't be, it wouldn't make it as interesting than to have different, that's why we love variety, a variety of flowers, variety of food, a variety of everything. So because in life we enjoy different things, in fiction we do too. We want to see those details of what makes things different in this story than in another story. Well, listen to these two different sentences. The man walked around the tree and got in his car. The next one, the wiry college student with long black hair walked around the elm tree and climbed into his white Jeep. Okay, maybe a little too much, right? A little too much description, maybe too much color, whatever. But there's a difference. One's kind of boring, doesn't really tell us anything. We don't know who this man is that's walking around, what tree, what car. And the other one is more specific, more concrete details. So again, we can overdo it and then we can take things out if we don't want to. So maybe it doesn't really matter what color his Jeep is unless there's a reason why it matters. Maybe he was involved in an accident. We're looking for a white Jeep. That might matter. So think about what matters and then add those details in there. Take the other ones out if it feels like it's just too much. So the last thing I want to add is that if you can, try to think about how to add a little action to your details and to your descriptions, because again, it gets the reader more involved in what you're saying. So an example here, using that same example of the guy walking around the elm tree. Okay, so joking with his college friends, John ran around the elm tree that blocked his Jeep and hopped inside. As his friend climbed into the back seat, he brushed his long hair away from his face and tied it back with a rubber band. Okay, so we can, see the action of them moving, getting into the car. So as I'm not just throwing descriptions at you or throwing details at you, I'm adding these details as something is going on so that you can see them, right? You can see the guy, the college kid jumping into the back seat, grabbing his hair, tying it back, right? So it brings a little more action. It gives us not just detail, description, because that's no fun either. Like nobody wants to read just a bunch of details and descriptions. We want to read it as it's relevant, and as we're reading the story, we almost don't notice it. And then that's what makes it great too, is we don't even notice sometimes that the author is throwing these details at us, but we are hearing them and we're reading them, right? And we are incorporating it into the story that we're building in our head. So that makes it, nice and effective, and great way to do it. So whether you're a descriptive writer, whether you add a lot of details to your story or not, doesn't matter. Again, I'm not a hugely descriptive writer. I've gotten better with time, but my rough draft still is very bare bones. But so it doesn't matter if you do it naturally, if you do it on your first draft. But at some point, when you're revising, add those details in there. If you can do it during your first draft, great. The more you can add in there, the better, because then the less you'll have to spend time later going, what should I add? Where should I add it? Why should I add it? Right? So the more you can add on when you're writing, the better, but at least have at some point in one of those steps, one of those revision steps, add concrete details, add descriptions, so that your story comes to life in the reader's mind. Okay, I hope that this has helped, and if it has, like always, please support the channel, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. You'll get the next, hit the notification bell so you get notified the next time that I do have a video. I try to have a video every Friday. So far, I've been successful in having a video every Friday, even with my busy college teaching life and writing life. I try to make time to make these videos. So I would appreciate it if you'd hit the like button. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.